Welcome to the Board of Police Commission's March 9th meeting, regular meeting. This one had been rescheduled due to some scheduling conflicts, so appreciate the ability to do this evening. Thank you all for joining us. Some of you may have noticed that we'll be live streaming tonight's meeting. The video will be uploaded to HRM's YouTube channel account and will be accessible to the public. The stream will be a static live shot. PowerPoints used may be hard to see, but will be posted to halifax.ca tomorrow by the Board of Police Commission agenda page on that page. I'd like to call to the meeting to order now and do our land acknowledgement that Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed to this territory and recognize that we are all treaty people. Now move to community announcements. Are there any community announcements? I'll just take a moment and comment a little bit about the conference that I was able to attend over the last 2 days in Ottawa. We were there for police wellness through the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police. Was able to attend with Chief Kinsella, Nira Ritzi, Dean Steinberg, and Christina. Sorry, I said that wrong, didn't I? Dean Simmons. And Christina Martin. And as well, Sue Black was there. And then what was the Dustin? Don't remember his last name. Can't remember. 2 of our RCMP members. And it was a really good, a great opportunity for me as the chair to be there and hear from other jurisdictions, hear other policing agents and resources brought to the table around policing wellness. Abundantly clear that the effects of trauma and PTSD and the challenges on human beings who are also police officers is not solely here. It's clearly across the country, no doubt, probably universal. And what was particularly interesting at this was that we were able to hear from other folks who had difficult situations, particularly difficult scenarios where mass deaths, and many case studies around best practice, some models of psychologists, in-house psychologists. I think that was particularly relevant to the work that we're doing here and some of the requests that our chiefs have talked about, and that it really was about having had enough conversation. Now it's action, and that there were some really good, really relatively small things that could be done, but were really relevant. I imagine some of the chiefs will speak to it a little bit, may or may not be tonight, but well worth going to. It was really nice for me to be there with the members as well, in particular the chief, that I could talk quickly and understand what the relevance was here to us in Nova Scotia. So I think it was, I was really glad I went. So thank you for that opportunity. Now move to the approval of an order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Commissioner Blackburn, do you have? Okay.
Yes, I do have an item that I.
Do you have your mic? Want to put your mic on?
Imagine me forgetting to turn on the microphone. Yes, I do have an item to add. I'm not sure what the number is, but.
It's 11.1.
11.1, thank you. And it's with regards to the public safety strategy.
Thank you. I see that's on our agenda already.
Oh, is it?
And so.
No, it's. I just have it there on the annotated agenda, just
I
as
see.
the
Okay,
addition.
so
Yeah.
it's not on your agenda. Thank you.
No.
So is there a seconder for that? Commissioner Smith? And any questions on that? Debate? No? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. We got the 2/3. Thank you.
And Chair Kent, we need to approve the minutes, please.
Thank you. Sorry, yes, I missed that. Commissioner Smith moves that the approval of the January 30th, 2023 and the February 6th, 2023 minutes. Is there a seconder? Thank you, Commissioner Giles. Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Thank you. Business arising out of the minutes, call for declaration of conflict of interest. Seeing and hearing none. Consideration of deferred business, there is none. Correspondence, petitions, and deletions. Do we have any correspondence?
Chair Kent, the clerk's office did not receive any correspondence or petitions for this meeting.
Thank you. Having none, we'll move on to presentations. So tonight we'll be hearing from Halifax Regional Police Extra Duty Police Policy, Matt Stickland. Can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, hello. Matt Stickland.
Oh, we need a mic on.
First time, long time listener, first time caller. I'm sitting over there. I will not be doing that today for obvious reasons. Hello. I can yell. I used to be in the Navy. Hello.
No, we need it for the mic
Oh,
for
yeah.
recording purposes. Yeah.
Oh, no, wait. Test. Test.
Oh, that doesn't. Sorry, what's the hockey? It's not F5 here. Oh, it's right there.
So before we get going, Matt, I just want to review the rules for presentations to the board. Presentation topics should relate to the police services, policies, and strategies, not to a single police action, relate to the board's oversight mandate, and not to the day-to-day of police operations, affected segment of the community, not a single individual, and not relate to a police conduct complaint. And you have 5 minutes.
I have a joke about Roberts and Borneo's rules of order in here. Anyways, hello, Board of Police Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to talk today. I'm incredibly nervous. I don't think I'll need to ask for a point of privilege to finish, but this is, in fact, a 5-minute speech. I should come under the wire. Before I became a journalist, I used to be in the military. And in the military, we have a saying, complacency kills. The military's trade is violence, and the Navy plies this trade with multi-billion-dollar warships. And so the military has policies and procedures in place to protect its members and assets from damage that would limit Canada's ability to protect those members or defend the country's sovereignty. And I used to be a submariner. And when you're in a submarine on the surface, we know where we are. But as soon as we dive, we can no longer be sure where we are in the ocean. So in order to keep our submarine safe, we take all of our knowns, like the speed of the submarine, all of our assumptions, like the effect of the current, and draw an ever-expanding bubble around the submarine. As soon as that bubble hits danger, we surface. Normally, we're fine. Normally, we're in the middle of the circle, exactly where we should be. Sometimes we are not. Sometimes we are complacent, and I am worried the board is being similarly complacent and blissfully steaming into danger like the Corner Brook pictured above. So with that, I'd like to take a look at extra duty cops and superstores, and hopefully you can ease my fears. But first, the foundations of those fears. In the criminal side of the legal system, Crowns need to be able to prove mens rea, also known as criminal intent, to pursue a conviction. The Crown's job is to seek the truth and determine whether or not pursuing a case is in the public interest. Loblaw is increasing the amount of self-checkouts, replacing humans with automated systems. Security guards in grocery stores are being replaced with police officers. Whereas a security guard in a grocery store usually needs to call a police officer can just make an arrest themselves, removing a layer of discretion. The pandemic has led to an increased backlog in the court system, and Crowns are overwhelmed with the volume of cases they have to sift through. The police keep stats for charges laid, but do not keep track of stats as soon as the file goes to court. The province does keep track of those files when they go to court, but they keep track of who has had charges laid, what their court orders are, and when they need to be back in court, but doesn't organize this data in a way that is easy to analyze. The police keep secret and are being sued by the CBC for doing so, which officers have been disciplined. Ironically, the police regularly release names of people who have received charges but not convictions. When people apply for jobs, the first thing potential employers do is Google the applicant's name. And finally, the police have been known to be not as forthcoming with information to this board as maybe they should be. For example, the Auditor General's IT audit. And my concern here is not that the police and superstores are behaving badly or that this is inherently a bad policy. My concern here is that there seems to be no way to gauge the effectiveness or success of this specific extra duty policy. There are, as I have outlined, a lot of places things can go wrong with this policy, and I could, and I would, because I'm very fun at parties, spend the next couple of hours coming up with ways in which these variables can ruin people's lives. But that's not my job. That's yours. So instead, I'll pick a mundane example. Say a hungry man steals food and catches a charge. The police put out a press release naming him, but the charges are dropped because the Crown's determined it wasn't in the public interest to pursue a case. Now he can't get a job because employers Google him and see a press release indicating he is a thief. Can you get enough information to prove that this situation is definitely not happening? Can you find out how many people are being charged with crimes at Superstore? Can you then find out how many of those charges result in convictions? Can you find out if naming people in press releases is hurting people's employment opportunities? And Mr. Kinsella will tell you that this does not happen, and you should absolutely believe him. However, you have to assume the head of your police department is reporting to you in good faith. However, unfortunately, you also need to be able to independently and proactively verify his reports. This also obviously goes for the RCMP. I'm worried that you cannot. And if you cannot, Halifax's public safety oversight has a single major vulnerability protected by an equally vulnerable single point of failure with no backup systems in place. I am hopeful the next person to speak will point out that this data does exist and I just haven't found it, and they'll just say, Matt, you idiot, it's right there. I'll be super embarrassed, and it's great. But so far, everyone I've spoken to has said this information that I'm looking for, the information you need to do oversight, does not exist in the way that I'm asking for it. And if you'll allow me to explain in my last 30 seconds why, as unorthodox as it may be for a journalist to present to the board they normally cover, I've decided today to present because when people find out that you've been in the military, they will often instinctively thank me for my service. What they are thanking me for is my willingness to sacrifice to ensure their freedom, but that wasn't actually my job. My job is to sacrifice myself if required so that you, in turn, have the power to make sure the freedoms guaranteed to us by the Charter are actually put in place. That's the deal I agreed to when I signed up. Twice lucky I did not die. But this is what was asked of me in service of your power. And I just ask that you remember what it costs.
Thank you, Matt.
I am here if you have any questions about information.
Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Giles.
Thank you for coming and presenting. And of course, thank you for your service. And I mean that sincerely.
Please don't.
You're a journalist and I am not.
Mhm.
You deal with press releases and I don't.
Mhm.
Can you point me in the direction of any single press release by the Halifax Regional Police or by the local detachment of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police indicating that a hungry man stealing for sustenance has been charged and flagged publicly, other than through whatever criminal litigation process might exist?
No, not necessarily. That complaint specifically was about press releases naming people who aren't necessarily convicted. So essentially it's saying, hey, this person broke into a car, they've broken into a car, and that goes out. So if you Google John Smith, you'll see has broken into a car on like April 2nd or whatever. So that's the practice specifically. I can't tell you if that's happening for Superstore. I can't tell you if it's consistently happening.
And can you hypothesize whether that process would be different if it was a security guard, either employed by the operator of the shop or the store, or a private operator who was employed on a per-person basis to provide those services, than if it was a serving police officer?
Yeah, so essentially that point was just it's removing a layer of human discretion. If a security guard has to decide I'm calling the cops have to then show up and then also decide I'm pressing a charge. It's two people making a decision to pursue whatever the charge is or whatever the action would have been. Whereas if you have automated systems in cops and stores, it's just one person making one decision. And if that person belongs to an institution that maybe historically has not institutionally made the best decisions, are they then conditioned to maybe not? And then what risk does that open up? And my question is exactly what risk does that open up? I don't know. I can't find out.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you so much, Matt, for your presentation. I very much appreciate it. I just wanted to draw your attention to item 10.3.2 on today's agenda.
Oh, this is not my computer. That won't work.
From Commissioner Critchley, and it's an appointment of members to the Board of Police Commissioners Policy Subcommittee.
Mhm.
And that subcommittee, I do know that the policy of which you are speaking is one of the first ones that is going to be examined by this subcommittee. And
And I to be clear, like I think the subcommittee, sorry, Chair,
Excuse
through you,
me?
Chair.
Matt,
I
I'm
can't do
sorry,
that.
but this is not a back and forth.
Right,
But
sorry,
she
yeah.
has a question specifically
No.
for you. Thank you.
I know better. Sorry, I'm really nervous.
there's no question. I just wanted to point that out, just to bring it to your attention, that it is something that is being taken very seriously by this commission. Thank you.
Mr. Critchley.
Commissioner
Oh, sorry, I
Critchley?
can't. Sorry.
I mean, maybe I'll just add to Commissioner Blackburn, and I'll put a little question at the end just to confirm that I'm understanding you correctly. But you've raised a couple different points, right? You talked about the extra duty policy. And
Yeah.
Commissioner Blackburn's correct that that's something that the board, it's been released publicly now, and the board's going to look at it with the subcommittee. And I'm really appreciative to the chief of wanting to develop that subcommittee structure. I see that as something that he's welcomed and his team is welcomed, and that's really positive. I see you talking about communication with the public in this issue around press, and I think communication with the public is a priority area for the board, just to be clear. How the police, what the kinds of information that the police communicate to the public. You might be aware, I brought motions in the past dealing with that as it relates to things like when there's active complaints ongoing. So, I mean, can I just clarify that I'm understanding you correctly, that those are sort of your two areas that you've identified, because this is a policy board.
Yeah.
So the two areas that you're looking for us to do policy work on relate to extra duty. And then the second would be how the police communicate with the public.
No, not quite. What I'm trying to communicate is that the subcommittee, the policy subcommittee, the work the policy subcommittee is going to, or I assume is going to do, because we're going to see what that looks like as it evolves and whatever. But and before that, what I believe this board was supposed to do was do this kind of rigorous tabletopping of worst case scenario with all police policies. Like I'm not seeing in this board the institutional rigidity of doing oversight. Like it just doesn't seem like there are mechanisms within this board to be asking these questions and be able to get this information to be able to determine whether or not the police force is in fact policing well. Like,
Okay.
can we
All
answer that question as the city? I
Thanks
don't
for
know.
clarifying. Yeah. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Any further? Thank you very much for coming out tonight, Matt. We appreciate it.
No problem.
Okay, there are no items brought forward. We now will have the Halifax Regional Police and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Chief updates. Chief Kinsella, we'll start with you this evening.
Thank you, Chair, and hello, everyone, and good evening. Chair Kent, members of the board, and to everyone else who is joining us virtually here today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the good work of our Criminal Investigation Division detectives who laid charges this week in a homicide investigation of Simon Joseph Morrison. Mr. Morrison was killed on April 16th, 2022 in Halifax. 19-year-old Keishwan Stevenson was arrested in Markham, Ontario by the integrated CID members with the assistance of the York Regional Police yesterday. He will appear in Halifax Provincial Court next week to face one charge of second-degree murder. Our thoughts are with the family and loved ones of Simon. I hope today's charges bring some closure to the family and the members and friends who are grieving his loss. Last Friday was Employee Appreciation Day, and this year we were able to do several meet and greets in person with our employees after a prolonged period of time due to the pandemic. There were many activities and get-togethers throughout our workplaces where members of our management team got to show off their cooking and hosting skills, preparing breakfast and lunches for various members. I'm proud of the hard work, professionalism, and service of Halifax Regional Police members. Day in, day out, they keep our community safe, and as chief, it was a pleasure to attend a number of these events. Our 2023 HRP cadet class is progressing well and is on track to graduate 27 cadets in July of this year. I'd also like to highlight a couple of examples of some excellent police work. As I've informed the board before, we have been hearing concerns related to business districts due to the ongoing crimes of opportunities that have been happening in various areas. And I will note this is something that several jurisdictions in Canada are experiencing. After listening to our community partners and responding to several instances in the area, we have put an emphasis on police presence in these neighborhoods. Community resource officers, members of the quick response unit, and patrol officers are performing patrols in various areas, and this has led to some good outcomes due to their diligence. Between the months of January and February, there were 5 commercial robberies in Halifax, and on March 7th, Central Division patrol officers, along with investigators with the Integrated Criminal Investigation Division, arrested a male for these instances. He was scheduled to appear in Halifax Provincial Court facing 46 charges, including robbery with a firearm, careless use of a firearm, disguised with intent, and a number of others. I want to also acknowledge another example of good police work by our officers for preparing for the recent truck convoy. That truck convoy was coming to Dartmouth and Halifax over the weekend of February 18th and 19th. This was an anniversary protest demonstration from last year that occurred in Ottawa. And we did experience that last year as well on several occasions. A robust operational plan was created and implemented to ensure everyone's safety, and as well as our team did an excellent job in liaising with other policing partners, including our partners sitting to my left. As I do each month in my update, I want to provide a quick summary on gun statistics and gun-related incidents of violence. This year overall, within our jurisdiction, we've had 2 homicides related to firearms and 3 shooting incidents in total. And one of our focuses and continuing areas of emphasis is the seizure of illegal or other types of firearms on the street. And to date, year to date, we have seized and taken off the streets 60 firearms. As far as our traffic update in the month of February for motor vehicle violations, we issued 771 summary offense tickets. 194 of those were driving without insurance and 88 for distracted driving. 23 charges were laid for impaired operation of a motor vehicle, and in addition, 6 suspensions were issued. And last month, as always, we're grateful to the community who call these types of offenses in. We received 59 calls for service to report suspected impaired driving, and 37 investigations were launched into those 59 reports. This month, we're going to focus on occupant restraints, or in simpler terms, seatbelt safety. HRP would like to remind all motorists to always make buckling up a habit, and before you start your vehicle, seatbelts are the last line of protection in a collision, and they help save lives and reduce injuries. And finally, just to build on the chair's comments from our conference this week, I was invited by the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police to speak at the wellness check. It was a great privilege and opportunity to discuss the traumatic impacts that we're all experiencing across the country, not just related to policing, but other impacts that relate and affect our lives on a daily basis. And the biggest takeaway, I think, for all of us that were in the room and had the opportunity to participate was, really 2 things. The importance of taking care of those who serve and protect everyone, and the focus on some of those small things that can have a big impact when you're dealing with this type of trauma. And finally, I have 2 pieces of good news that I'd just like to share with the board. The first one I'd like to share, a letter I received over the past month, and it's from a citizen. And the citizen states, "I'm writing to express my gratitude for 2 of your officers. They responded to a wellness call I placed on behalf of our next door neighbor yesterday afternoon. Their calm, professional, and compassionate conduct was exemplary, and they are to be commended, as was the case also with the other officer and ambulance attendants who responded later. I hope that you may be able to pass along my gratitude to them." I was able to do that and recognize the officers. Again, much like trauma, it's those small things that go on every day that we don't always hear about. And the last one I'd like to share, it's from a mother whose child was injured in a motor vehicle collision. And she talks about, on Saturday night, gives the time, my daughter was a passenger in a bad car accident. It was on the Bears Lake area of Halifax. As a mom, I want to thank the officer who was the first on the scene with her. My daughter was in rough shape, several broken bones. She climbed out of the ditch with those injuries to be greeted by one of your officers who held her, comforted her until the ambulance came. Thank you. The same officer came back to check on her in the hospital. I can't put into words how thankful I am. She is okay and she will heal. I just want to pass those on as two little reminders of the great work that the men and women of the Halifax Regional Police are doing day in and day out, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief. Are there any questions of the chief or comments? Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chief, for the report, and especially the last two. It's good to hear that information. So 2 questions on items that you reported on. So with the 27 cadets that are going through the program now, I'm wondering what type of impact that will have on your, I don't know what word I'm looking for, like personnel, because I know with retirements, and I know that you've been preaching for a long time that you don't have enough folks. So I'm just wondering what impact does those 27 being sworn in have on you getting to, I'm using quotations, a full complement. And also just related to the weapons that are seized. I know a few years ago we were dealing with issues around the evidence locker and storage and whatnot. So, and I think, I'm using my memory, which is not a great thing to do. I think at the last meeting you mentioned that we're seeing more weapon seizures than we have in the past. And does that impact how you are storing these? Because you have to keep them, I'm assuming, or for, I'm not sure of the period, but I'm assuming there's some point you have to keep them and then destroy them. So I'm just wondering how that impacts your storage in general, not just for weapons, but just your evidence storage in general.
Sure, and thanks, Commissioner. Appreciate the question, and through you, Chair, to the Commission. I'll start with the graduating class, and as you know, we have the great privilege of having our own Cadet Sciences program. We're very committed to that. It reduces some barriers for people to get into policing, allows us to, on many levels, help our police service represent the community that they serve. So that's one piece. We are also, and I've reported on in the past, I didn't specifically say it tonight, we are committed to hiring experienced police officers as well. And many of my colleagues across the country, I was speaking to them this week, are doing the very same thing. So we've got the 2 streams going. We've got the Cadet Science program. We've got the experienced police officers, and we do expect to hire 5 of those experienced officers by the end of March. The other piece that's important to remember, and you stated it, Commissioner, is we do have ongoing retirements. We do have ongoing individuals that choose to go into a different line of work or just move on to something else. So that is a fluid number that regularly changes. Right now, currently, if everything stays status quo and nobody else retires, we will be very close to that full complement. But I don't know that we'll get there depending on what we predict of retirements. We have some senior people going, whether they follow through on that. Sergeants get retired. We promote constables. That creates a constable vacancy. So we are working very hard on that, and we're committed to continuing that to ensure that we have the future-ready organization that we need as we move into year after year and prepare for those retirements. And just moving on to the exhibits piece, so not specifically related to firearms, we have a property and exhibit section that's managed by some very good people who are monitoring. We do have limited space at our Gottingen Street storage facility. We also do store some things off-site at secure locations, depending on how long they can be held away. Your question was specific to firearms, and with the number of firearms that we are seizing, we are at a point now where, it does fill up. And what we do is we have regular purge dates. I personally don't look after them, but once the timeline for retention is met, then we, if we can destroy them, we destroy them. If they're to be returned to someone, they get returned. Or if they have to be held for evidentiary purposes, for future criminal trials, for one thing or another, we could be hanging on to them for a very long time. So it is a regular management thing. And the other example I was used is we recover property all the time that does take up space. Bicycles are one of them, for example. So we have a retention, destruction, and purging cycle that we adhere to try to make sure that we have the appropriate storage facility when new things come in.
We're working on that, just so you know.
I was inspired by my colleague, Josiah. Chair, good day through you to the commissioners, board members, and community. Start by acknowledging yesterday was a very important day. It was International Women's Day. Coincidentally, it was also the International Day of Fallen Police Officers. So 2 very special days perhaps to acknowledge. Just a few high-level things in terms of HR, strategic, and just a few operational comments for the board. Probably one of the most interesting things is we're partway through community consultations in 3 communities. We've been in Porter's Lake, Middle Musquodoboit, and of course, wonderful, beautiful Cole Harbour last night. So it's been a very positive experience. Staff Sergeant Lyndon Morrison's been quarterbacking along with Inspector Michael Flynn, and we have 4 more next week. Most of those are close to the physical location of each detachment where we provide primary and core service. Hopefully again in May or June, I'll be able to continue that circle of getting out to meet community folks, but I do want to acknowledge the people that have made time to come out and visit. It's been very much appreciated. At the same time, those visits have shown some of the work ongoing in Middle Musquodoboit and Musquodoboit sort of valley, the north central area that we call it. The RCMP is in the middle of about a $2.5 million renovation for both buildings. Basically, a brand new trailer is being installed that's been renovated and will be up on a footprint in Musquodoboit, Middle Musquodoboit, and the Musquodoboit Harbor, detachment will be completely gutted. Both those renovations are well underway. And as a relation or notion of how the contract works, that investment doesn't really flow back directly to HRM. And when we get an official opening date, I'd be pleased to extend that to the board, as it is a win-win to see modern buildings in a community that is welcoming and as customization or customized for the community as we can make it. There's also an important officer staffing process underway for Lower Sackville, and we're getting close. That staffing process should yield a name by the end of April, and the officer staffing process, hopefully by the end of April, we'll be able to announce the name to the board for who will occupy that inspector position. Similarly, the other vacant inspector position in Cole Harbour is also being staffed, but that's being just delayed to make sure we work through one step at a time. A couple other quick points. Yesterday morning was ComStat, and some of you have been there from the counselor side of ComStat. But yesterday morning, all the primary NCOs, as well as Sheila Surface, again, we're looking at crime trends, et cetera, to make sure that we are predicting and putting our people in the most effective places for police interventions. Ms. Surface will be consulting through me to the counselors. I don't think some of the board members, Chair, would have been invited to the counselors' ComStat. I would look to you for your guidance in case that might be of interest to some of the board members that have not been to it, or perhaps some of the city staff. But I would be pleased to extend an invitation if you as a chair felt that would be a welcome addition. In terms of operations, just a few highlights. Some of you would have been aware of the tragic end, but a very serious file approximately 1 week ago in Lower Sackville West operations, where there was a male involved in a very serious matter, which later fled the scene, which was believed to be armed. I have to say it was a tremendous police response by both the Halifax Regional Police and the RCMP. Just fantastic work. You would also be aware, for many or most that were in the community at the time, of an alert that went out. We continue to just want to acknowledge the members that did some high-risk activities by going out on the ice to try and find a person in distress. And in fact, they were HRP members. So Dan, thank you for the service of your members in that matter. Similarly, one of the discussions that the board has had and is very interested in is mental health calls. Staff Sergeant Morrison and I have been working with a number of stakeholders, including sort of the director that oversees the mobile mental health response team. And we're beginning conversations to understand that model and if potentially what would be required for that model to extend into sort of other RCMP areas such as Lower Sackville, Cole Harbour, et cetera. It's very early days yet, but it was very positive to have that conversation. It's very positive to have others on the team looking at the metrics and the evidence and the possible solutions around whether or not that best practice could be expanded. An example of that spectrum involving both police agencies happened on February the 17th. A male arrested by Halifax Regional Police was suicidal and taken to hospital. He would later be released by doctors as not being fit for incarceration. He would later leave the hospital, in fact, be in an argument in a taxi. Sorry, not a taxi, but a driver. And then later he would take off in a different vehicle and become involved tragically in a fatality in RCMP jurisdiction. The high-risk nature of these mental health calls will continue to require collaboration and the best efforts of all parties in so many spectrums of service to try and provide the best fit with the limited resources here in HRM. Lastly, in respect to a new phenomenon that is beginning to hit sort of Canada, and I would arguably internationally, is 3D printing of firearms. So 3D printing is something that many of us may feel dated on, but it's a concept that an individual can have a polymer printer and using a computer and software actually print out pieces of a firearm that can be assembled and actually become a weapon. In fact, there was a joint investigation between the Canada Border Services Agency and later involved the SKU Street Crime Enforcement Team that works primarily out of Cole Harbour. That led to a number of steps in the investigation. And in fact, you may or may not have seen a press release that was released, but a male faces charges for smuggling, possession of a firearm suppressor, and 3D firearm components to enable handguns to become fully automatic. So in essence, somebody is able to begin, and whether he did or not, that matter remains before the investigative stage, so I'm restrained by how much I can speak about that. But the fact is, it's a new domain. It's a new domain that a person can, in theory, have parts and materials come in from outside the country, and that can be established and built in someone's basement. Lastly, the District Powpom is set for the 28th and 29th, being held here at Oak Island, of which some of you have been invited respectfully on behalf of the RCMP to attend. It's important to note that that developmental day will be the first one in a number of years because of COVID, but in fact, there's a number of important themes. There are themes to do with working, such as having guests from the Community Action Team under Dr. Amy Siciliano. There will be some quick discussion around the public safety strategy and how are we complementing and getting our head around that to support that. There's discussion about some of the work in community and working with all spectrums of the community, first responses to high-risk calls, et cetera. There's quite a topical developmental day and a half design. Be pleased if some of the board wanted to drop by from time to time. I would, of course, welcome your interest to attend and see parts of that if that was an interest. And by all means, feel free to follow up with me if that's something that's of interest. Unless there's any specific questions, Chair, that would be my report.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Commissioner Critchley.
Thank you, Chair Kent. Just got 3 sets of questions, if that's all right. The first, obviously, Chief Superintendent Christie, the consultation is still ongoing, but you said you have completed 3 sets of consultation to date. I wonder if you could just speak at a high level about what the kind of main themes or findings of the consultation have been.
Chair, through you to the Commissioner. Thank you, Commissioner. I would describe them first and foremost as very wholesome, well-meaning, very earnest people. The numbers are small, unfortunately, but the fact that the numbers are small don't, for me and the team that we serve, every voice or every opportunity that we get to hear from somebody is quite a positive moment. So the three themes that I would summarize at this juncture would be sort of presence, visibility, traffic safety, and basically a concern, writ large about policing today. Are the police here? Are they moving? Do we still have, buildings, so on and so forth? Always a bit of a thirst about what does the future look like. So those would be my high-level three themes, but very wholesome conversations. And I look forward to the next week where we're in Lower Sackville, Tantallon, North Preston, and I'm forgetting one, but Sheet Harbor.
Okay, I've got 2 more sets of questions, if that's all right. I'm still in my 5 minutes. The next was about the mobile mental health crisis team. Very positive to hear some preliminary conversations there. I just want to get some clarification regarding kind of the maybe scope and goal associated with those. So is the kind of plan at some point to look at extending this service, or what would be involved in extending the service, what the cost would be in extending the service, both in terms of its hours and its geographical scope? I just want to get some clarification here. That would be number one. And then you had talked about sort of metrics of success that had been identified in these conversations for this program, the mobile mental health crisis team. So I just wondered if you could say a little bit more about that.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner, Chair, through you to the Commissioner, to the board, to the community. The first thing that I'm, again, unfamiliar with, and some of our team is unfamiliar with, is what is the number of RMs or current police officers in that model, surrounded by sort of healthcare practitioners. And that team serves certain core geographic areas. It doesn't physically respond to, say, Lower Sackville or to Cole Harbor, is my understanding. So what we're trying to understand by creating this dialogue is what would be the numbers in theory, based on the nature of all the calls that we have. What are the parameters? How do they track calls that they respond to? How does that match to what the impact could be in RCMP areas if we began to explore that? So I think, to your point, it begets a conversation, begets a ladder and a pathway to get to a discussion, say, if that team could be expanded, what is the resourcing, what are the parameters, who are the social partners that would be required in case that became a reality. So I think it's very positive to begin that discussion, but it's very early days.
That was going to be my question. Clarification is we are sort of early days in that, though. Generally.
Totally early days.
And my understanding, and just from your understanding, because mine is even more limited than yours, that currently, if someone is having a mental health crisis in Sheet Harbor, they cannot call this phone line and access a service. Is that
so? They may be able to route through, that team may be able to take a call and assist with consultation with police officers or not, and I might have to turn to Lyndon in a minute to speak to that, but they don't physically respond, right? So the mobile mental health team, if I understand the parameters correctly, they are more or less geographically situated for Dartmouth, Halifax, and Bedford, and I could be off a little bit on that, but I know that both police agencies may be coming before the board for a more in-depth conversation, but I thought I would share with the board that we have reached out in that area.
Great, thank you. And I'm just going to ask one more question, if that's all right, Chair Kent.
Just let me, you actually have 30 seconds, and then I'll check with the others.
Well, why don't I cede the time, and then you check the others, and I'll use my 3 minutes. Thanks. Thank you. Next question, Chief Christie, if it's all right. I want to ask you about the United Against Racism course. I understand this is an online course that was rolled out through Vision 150. And I just wanted to know about how that program, how that online course has been rolled out specific in Halifax District. If you have a sense at a very high level, what the kind of completion rate is for that course, and what the plan is to going forward, have officers and other RCMP staff access that course.
Could you repeat the last part of the question? What's the plan for
So,
other officers to have access to the?
What percentage of officers have completed the course? What percentage of staff still need to complete the course?
Okay.
And what's the plan in place to have those officers complete that course?
So thank you, Commissioner Chair. We have a wonderful lady by the name of Corporal Christine Hobbin, who is a sort of a training facilitator, overseer of interface with a lot of our training components in the district. So there is absolutely an Agora course. I don't have the metrics right here off the top of my head. I do know that she's tracking towards the end of April. Is off the top of my head. I asked her to close the loop back to me for the end of April to see where we are. So training is part of our we have a strategic agenda where we meet quarterly. Training is sort of a standing item on that, Commissioner. And I apologize, I'm not exactly aware of where the numbers for that are today.
No, not to put you on the spot, obviously. So, but if you are able to, I maybe ask you in April, if you have the information then about the completion rates, because I was able to access the completion rates for H Division and for the RCMP nationally.
Okay.
It was referenced in a newspaper article.
Oh,
But I'd like to know specifically about Halifax District.
Yes, so for the board, Commissioner and Chair, through you to the board, Agora is just a synonym for an online training component. So you can sit at your computer, basically sign on and do a 2 or 3 hour component module course. Our colleagues often use the Canadian Police Knowledge Network, which is a similar repository of online learning. Online learning is often adopted because it can speed delivery and access by all employees here in HRM. So again, I'd be pleased to take that away and bring back sort of more of a defined update the next time. I would share with the board that at the dinner, retired Commanding Officer Craig Gibson, who was our most senior African Nova Scotian member that served at one time in Prince Edward Island and has extensive service in Nova Scotia. He is accepted to be the keynote speaker at the upcoming dinner. So, thank you.
Thank you. I'd just like to add as well that really pleased to hear that your conversations are beginning with the mobile mental health program. New opportunities and potentially new models come from those kinds of conversations. And it's the beginning of some of the, the information that we heard loud and clear through the defund report. So I'm glad to hear that that's happening at that level. And of course, we already have that model in the HRP space. Just want to make a comment on the CommStats and the Oak Island information. I think it's certainly want you to know that I would like the board members that have participated in some version of something at the engagement with RCMP have very much appreciated. So any opportunities, please just forward that along, and we'll make sure that our commission members have opportunities to participate. And same with that consultation that will be, with the Oak Island scheduling for opportunities to drop in. We make sure that they have that as early as possible and they can get some of that maybe in their schedules. So we appreciate you including us in all of that. The consultation, I just want to remind commissioners that those town halls, it would be great if some of our members were able to attend. I don't know if any were able to attend this week. I know I was away, so I'm not quite sure. But if you can, I think we did share that schedule. Appreciate the work you did on that, Lyndon. It's important stuff. So glad to hear that it's happening. Yeah, thank you. All right, I think that's it. Yeah. Thank you. Move on to 10.2.1, the Auditor General's follow-up review of the 2021 Halifax Regional Police Information Technology Report. We have Evangeline Coleman-Saad, our Auditor General.
Thank you. Is this, sorry, I can't quite tell. Is that on?
Yes,
Okay. Thanks. I'm pleased to be here this evening to talk about my follow-up report. We released a follow-up report in February that looked at a HRP information technology report that that audit had originally been released in February of 2021. Just, I guess, to remind folk, there were two reports from that audit. One was public and the other was in camera and remains in camera due to the sensitive nature of IT security. So there are also two follow-up reports. So I'll just remind commissioners, I'm only going to speak to the public report in this forum. And if we wanted to talk about the in-camera report, it would need to be in camera. I can state one thing publicly, however, in relation to both reports, and that is that HRP did a great job in implementing the recommendations from both of those reports. The implementation rate was at 92% for both, which exceeds the 18-month target that we look for as an office of 80%. I am aware that all of the recommendations in the public report were reported back to this commission as being fully completed a number of months ago. And I just wanted to clarify something with that and make sure there's no lingering questions on it. That was very much a misunderstanding from what we gathered when we did our follow-up work. So the way that recommendation was worded, it spoke to policies, but there was a lead in to the rec. That lead in named some specific policies. When we wrote the rec, we meant all policies. When management implemented the rec, they interpreted it as the ones that were mentioned in the narrative that led to the recommendation. No issues in terms of our dealings with police on that matter. Found management quite receptive to the fact that, yes, there's still other policies as well that need to be addressed. And so that's the reason for that difference in what we had versus what you might have heard from management. And that's why the recommendation that deals with accurate reporting to the board was assessed by management and by us as complete, because I felt that was a genuine misunderstanding. I had no concerns that there was any intent to mislead the board or anything like that. And so I assessed that one as complete. So just moving to the next slide again, great implementation rate across both reports. We normally target 80% for 18 months. This was at 92%. And the other thing that I think it's important to acknowledge is that the recommendations here weren't necessarily easy fixes. IT audits tend to come with recommendations that can be a bit challenging to implement. They require a fair bit of resources oftentimes, and this certainly would have required significant efforts to implement. So some of the areas where improvements have been put in place are in information reporting, risk management, security awareness training, and inventory of information assets. There is one outstanding recommendation, again, related to those policies, and we will follow that up at some point, as well as the recs that were outstanding in the in-camera report. So I just wanted to wrap up by saying thank you to HRP management and staff for good cooperation during our review, and thanks to the staff in my office that completed the work. And that is it for my presentation. And if any of the commissioners have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much. Any questions from commissioners? Okay, Commissioner Blackburn. I'm going to go to Giles, Smith, and Critchley.
All right. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. No, I just have a quick question. So where do we go from here? Is there a further follow-up? Is there a further report to make sure that all the recommendations have been implemented, or is this sort of it?
So our process is to follow up after 18 months. And any outstanding recommendations at that point, we will follow up at some point in the future, but we don't have quite as defined a time frame for that. It sort of depends on a few things: how many audits there are with outstanding recommendations, how many outstanding recommendations there are overall. From a resourcing perspective for my office, I try to combine those. So realistically, it will be, I would say, up to a year before we look at the last couple of recs to see, or the last one in the public report and whatever's left in the in-camera one, to see if those are complete or not. And the other thing maybe that I'll clarify is that follow-up work is a review level, so it's a different level of assurance than the original audit. It requires less work on our part to complete. But it also means that we're not looking at it as in greater detail as we did when it was originally audited. So to your point about what's next, I mean, my office may at some point in the future look at it as an audit again. There's obviously lots of topics we could look at, so that probably won't be soon. And then management themselves could choose to have some work done in that area as well at some point in the future.
Thank you, and thanks for the update. From a very high-level perspective, what does the security awareness training look like?
I think you'd have to ask management what they had done for security awareness training. So we would have followed up. We would have gotten some documentation on the fact that they had training. But if you wanted to get into the details of that, that would be a management question. We wouldn't have looked at it in great detail as part of a follow-up review. If we were doing an original audit, we might have looked at it in a little more detail.
Thank you.
Commissioner Smith?
Thank you. So just on this, understanding where we came from and how we got here, there a lot to kind of go back and look at why we got to this in the first place, but we don't have to go back there. So understanding that, and it seems you're confident doing the cross-checking with the chief, and the chief, you've come and presented to the board on multiple occasions in public and camera through this process. So I think I do feel confident that it's correct. But if we go back and look at what was reported and what was found by you through your audit, you're confident that we're not going to see that again with this process of something was reported, but it actually was not founded in when you looked in deeper.
Are you talking, sorry, specifically about the recommendation that dealt with information to the
So I was-
board or the whole report?
The whole report, just in the sense of we're not, you're not going to be here and go say, hey, actually, we thought everything was complete, but then we dug deeper and actually it's the same thing that happened before. I don't think that's the case, but I just want to get your assurance that you don't feel that that's going to happen again.
So a couple of things on that. It is a different level of assurance. And I don't, I'm certainly not trying to imply that I think there's issues there. When you do a review, you're not looking at things at the level of detail that you would. So I'll give you an example, whether or not policies are in place. You would look for the policies. You wouldn't dig as deep into, are they all implemented? So on an audit, you might pull a sample of 30 and look at them to see if the policy worked in all of those 30. On a review, you might only look at a small number, like 2 or 3. So it's not the same level of detail. However, I will say, like a lot of this dealt with policy implementation and getting practices in place. Certainly from a review perspective, things look good. Both audits and reviews are at a point in time. You can never give assurance that going forward that it will stay that way, but you can certainly hope as auditors that when you put out recommendations and management makes positive changes associated with them, that those positive changes stay in place once they've done the work to develop the policies and implement them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Critchley?
Thanks so much, Chair. I'm just wondering if you could, so I understand that this last outstanding recommendation is outstanding because there's some policies that have been finalized, which is wonderful.
Yeah.
What are the other policies? I'm wondering if you could give me a list of them. No.
So, sorry, I couldn't give you that list. You could get a list from management. We would have perhaps that list back in our files of what was outstanding. It may not be an inclusive list because if we encountered, say, 2 or 3 that were outstanding, then at that point there's outstanding policies and they're not all completed and we know that. So if you're looking for an absolutely inclusive list of what's done and what's outstanding, you would need to get that from management.
Okay, I see Chief Kinsella is sort of nodding. Oh, is that all right if I ask Chief to follow up on that question?
Yes, absolutely.
Sure, and through you, Chair, to the Commissioner, absolutely. We have the list. And I can tell you, as I did many times as we came along, we are committed to these final outstanding. There's very few of them. And we're actioning them as we speak. We can have a conversation of what that reporting looks like with the board. But also, to your comments at the beginning of the meeting, I think in relation to the subcommittee, that could be another set that we bring early on if that is the desire of the committee and the board.
Sounds great. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you. No further. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's sad. We appreciate that and appreciate the work that you do every day. And now we will move to 10.2.2, understaffing, long-term absences, mental health claims at Halifax Regional Police, an overview of issues and recommendations for improvements. And we have Melanie Gibson with Human Resources to present.
Could I just for 1 second? As the chair.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, not to point at you.
Okay.
Just as a question of clarification, I'm wondering whether, I know this has been our practice in the past, but where item 10.3.1, the motion, relates to this presentation. Perhaps I should have, my apologies to the clerks. I'm sure Ian's going crazy right now because I've missed the step. But I'm wondering if the motion should be dealt with following the presentation. I have no issue though if we prefer to wait, given that the agenda's been set now.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable way to approach it. The presentation would normally be done, but if there's a consensus around the table to allow for that to be moved, then I certainly would support that.
Thank you, Chair
Yeah,
Kent.
thank you. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon, Chair, Commissioners. Thank you for having me. I know it's been a couple of visits, so happy to finally be able to present this report to you. So this is the result of a motion that was passed in March of 2021, I believe, or 2022, sorry. And myself and a group or a team were tasked with looking at some data and compiling a report in response to the motion. So I'll just start with introducing myself. My name is Melanie Gibson. I'm the Manager of Labor Relations at HRM. I'm also the Labor Relations Specialist, currently providing support to police. So as I said, myself and a variety of team members, so our HRBP, Marlene Miller, some of our health specialists, Joy Ducharme, Cheryl Landry Johnson, Megan Young, all helped with some of the research and data collection, along with a variety of people in finance and HR. So this is just the initial motion. So the motion asked for a study on 3 kind of key issues, being long-term absences, understaffing, and increased mental health claims, as well as recommendations relating to those issues. So I think you've all had a chance to read the report by now, so I'm not going to, spend too much time going over all of the numbers and the details, and there will be a chance for questions at the end. The first issue that we looked at was long-term absences. So we define that as 30 days or longer. And as you can see from the data provided in terms of annual absence in long-term or in hours, there's been a steady increase over the past 10 years. There's definitely, a spike in 2020 and a little bit of a decline since then. But even now in 2022, we're still very much above what we were 10 years ago. And I would also like to point out that the long-term absences, it is any type of absence that is coded in the system. So it includes pregnancy and parental, it includes LTD, it includes workplace injury. 2 of the sections that it does not include are secondments and modified duties. And there were some challenges with doing that and with getting that data in an accurate form. With modified duties, part of the problem is that the person, maybe they're not working in their home position, but they might actually be doing duties in another area. So they're not really absent, although that move might actually impact staffing. So this graph just provides a little further breakdown on the types of long-term absences. So hopefully you can see that with the colors, but most of the types of absences have been relatively consistent over the past 10 years, with the major exception of workplace injury. You'll see quite a sharp spike in 2020. And we will look at some of the reasons for that in the next slide. So I guess to provide some background information, HRP sworn members were not always part of WCB. They were at one point, then they fell under a self-insured program. And then in 2019, there was moved back to WCB. Hence, this data that you're shown in this slide starting in 2019. So the data here shows a breakdown between physical, psychological, and COVID claims. And you can also see the average lost time claim duration is quite high for some of them. So for physical, we have an average duration away from work is at 11 weeks versus psychological, which is at 53 weeks. So quite a big difference between those two. So we also tried to look at in the report or address some of the potential contributing factors, or at least some of the points for consideration when we're looking at this data. So the first was the presumptive legislation piece. So in 2014, the Workers' Compensation Board actually added psychological injuries as a compensable claim. And then in 2018, they added the presumptive legislation, which meant if you were an emergency responder and you were diagnosed with PTSD, the presumption was that you got it in the workplace. You no longer had to prove that. So as expected, there was, we did see an increase. However, given our move to WCB in 2019, it's kind of hard to separate some of the data. Another thing which you will see in the report is that this increase in psychological injuries is not unique to HRP. It can be seen across the country. So we were able to secure data from the National Association of Workers' Compensation Boards. I can't remember the acronym, it's a mouthful, which shows, everybody is struggling with these increases, and the increases don't necessarily align in all of the provinces with the creation of presumptive legislation. Another factor that we have to consider with psychological injury claims is the lengthy time away from work. So right now we're looking at an average of 53 weeks, which is just over a year. So it is currently taking a long time to get people back to work after they experience a psychological injury. And another factor that could be playing into some of the increase in the hours lost for workplace injury leave is difficulty in identifying return to work or accommodation options. So we, as an organization, I do think HRP is doing a very good job of finding work for people, but it is not easy. And whether or not it's always the best match in terms of getting people back to their home position quickly, there's further research and work to be done there. And another factor that could be exacerbating some of the leave data was COVID-19. So I think everybody can understand or agree that, it impacted mental health negatively. And it's not a surprise to see some of those numbers go up. But, part of the other problem was that it impacted access to healthcare during that time. So people who needed treatment, to help them get back to work, there was delays in some of the treatment. Sometimes there's delays in getting the required documentation in order to assess viable return to work options. Those were all problems that impacted the absences. So aside from workplace injury, two other areas of long-term absences that have seen increases are LTD and sick leave. So LTD has been somewhat more inconsistent, but still has been increasing over the past 10 years. And this follows reports that we're getting from, the rest of the country, mostly through insurance providers, definitely seeing increases in LTD. A lot of that being attributed to increases in mental health diagnoses. And kind of coinciding with that is an increase in sick leave hours. So when you're going on LTD, there's a waiting period. So it's 120 days with our sworn members. So anytime that you see an increase in LTD, we're also going to see an increase in those long-term sick absences. So the second issue that the report looked at was an increase in mental health claims, which was not an easy task. Mental health, encompasses a wide variety of things, not just psychological injuries, so not just PTSD. So we did try to capture some other data. Another data set that was available to us was the data coming from the Employee Family and Assistance Program. So the chart that you see here represents annual referrals. So this is not calls. These are calls that result in the person being referred on for treatment or for further services. And so there has been an increase in the usage of this service. I should also point out that this is employee and family. So this graph is not specific to employees. And the next page focuses on WCB and PTSD. And I would just like to point out that, I recognize that PTSD is not the only mental health claim. It's not the only psychological injury, but in Nova Scotia, it is the primary psychological injury that's compensable through WCB. And so that's how we kind of isolated the data. You'll see from this that pretty much all provinces have seen an increase over the past 6 or 7 years. So again, this problem is not unique to Halifax. And so trying to isolate, contributing factors was really challenging with this, short of getting some really systematic feedback from employees. It's really difficult to say specifically what is creating this increase. Is it purely a result of legislative changes, of COVID? It's really hard to say. So we kind of turned to the research to identify some potential factors. And some of these are elaborated in the report, or at least connects you with some research if you'd like to hear some further information on that. So burnout was one. Overworked employees, which covers not just excessive hours, but also doing more with your time than you used to. Job-related stressors, which captures the first two as well. And then lack of early detection, which I will just spend a minute on because I do think this is an important one and it is heavy in the research. So HRP does have some early detection mechanisms, such as the safeguarding program, CISM, those types of things, but it is not widespread. And the research talks a lot about, really identifying people who are at risk early on. There are other organizations that have this. The RCMP is currently doing a 10-year longitudinal study to look at the effectiveness of this. And really the benefits of it are that you not only flag risk areas early on, but you can start with identifying and removing challenges. You can start with treatment options a lot earlier on and hopefully, prevent people from experiencing the true injury. So the third issue is understaffing. And, none of these issues are really separate. They all kind of overlap with one another. Understaffing is a really difficult one. We were unable to isolate data that specifically said, are you understaffed here? Are you not understaffed? The best that we could really do was look at how many people are absent. And so we did that by looking at the long-term absence data, which I already talked about, and then also looking at the short-term absence data. So as you can see from short-term absences, yellow represents sick leave, which is the bulk of your short-term absences, and short-term absence being defined as under 30 days. So it has been increasing since 2011. The number of police employees has not gone up, enough to account for this difference. There's been a very small increase in employees over that time period. So again, without, direct feedback from employees on sick leave usage, we, thought, how can we try and get at different sets of data that might be more indicative of what the problem is? And one thing we did was look at those very short term sick leave absences. The reason being is that the research points out that those 2-day leaves are sometimes indicative of burnout, of fatigue. And so when we did that, it is, quite striking. If you look at 2011, where you were for those short-term occurrences, I don't have the exact number here. You're somewhere around 800 and something. And then in 2022, we're all the way up past 1,900 occurrences in 1 year. Part of that is COVID, undoubtedly the last 2 years. However, COVID cannot account for all of that. Most people who are off with COVID are off for 5 days or longer. And I know with the shifts, that sometimes means you might only miss 2 days of work, but there's a lot of 5-day employees in here. So we didn't think that could account for all of that. So what we also did in the report was try to highlight what police is already doing that we think gets at some of these issues and that, would have been captured in the recommendations. So we have the safeguarding program, which is where on an annual basis, employees who are in those high-risk positions are sent for assessments with a psychologist to kind of flag any risks. We have critical incident stress management, which is kind of a post-incident debrief that is put on through our EFAP coordinators at Halifax Regional Police. There's the post-critical incident check-in, which is similar to the assessment done with the safeguarding program, and that's for people who have been identified as being directly impacted by an incident. There's the peer support program, which again comes out of the EFAP coordinator's office. There's significant return to work actions being taken at police in terms of getting people back to work, even if it's not in, the home position that they were injured and had to leave work from. There's the reintegration program, which I think you've already heard a lot about, so I won't go into detail on that. And there was also the addition of a new health specialist in the human resource office at police. Which brings us to the last part, the recommendations. We divided them by short to medium and the medium to long, although there's definitely some overlap here. So in terms of more immediate actions that we felt could be started quite quickly, the first was data collection. So since there were issues at getting at some of the data that would have helped to answer some of the board's questions a little better, that's probably a good place to start. So in terms of staffing, if we're truly looking to find out, like, how often are we understaffed? How often are you calling in people to backfill? That's data that needs to be better tracked. Workforce planning, which is definitely something that already happens, but perhaps we should be accounting for long-term absences within that workforce planning. The reintegration program, so that is still a new program. So I think, there's still evaluation that needs to be done in the first year of that being an active program. But part of the recommendation in that is ensuring that there's proper support, including staffing and expertise. And the other thing is, education around that. It is a voluntary program. Right now, my understanding is that its focus is on people who've had a workplace injury who are off for a long period of time or who have the potential to be. In other organizations, there is access to it for short term or for people who are away, not just because of injury, maybe it's parental leave or something like that. So educating employees on the availability of that program and what they can use it for. Return to work. So I've already mentioned this one, but really formalizing the framework and determining what the measurable outcomes for success are going to be for that. So a lot of the work is already being done. It might just be, formalizing and bringing some consistency to that work. And again, identifying meaningful return to work options, which I realize is challenging. Personally working on the human resource side of things, I know the challenges that we have in terms of finding people the right match to get them back to work in a meaningful way. Assessing existing data. So we already have a lot of data. It might not have been, in direct answer to some of the questions that the board was looking for, but we do have data on, sick leave usage, overtime, things like that. So we could actually do some more research into that data to see if there's any trending in terms of demographics, gender differences, age differences, things like that. And then the last short-term recommendation being feedback mechanisms. So as mentioned in the report, HRM does have an exit interview program. It is offered to all employees upon leaving the organization, but perhaps there's some work to be done in encouraging the completion of those. The other thing could be an employee survey in order to get more detailed feedback about sick leave usage, burnout, morale, things like that. And then moving on to medium and long term, we have prevention, which I included it in the medium to long term because, really the thought was that prevention is part of a well-planned, wide encompassing mental health strategy. But prevention really, we're always looking at prevention. And also along with coming up with that strategy and with that framework is educating managers and ensuring that everybody's supportive of the initiatives that come out of that framework and program. And number 2, looking at the data that was part of the recommendation in the short to medium term recommendations and assessing the reintegration program. So, after a year, after it's been up and running for a little longer, it might be time to look at it and see how is it working? Do we have the necessary resources? Are there tweaks to be made? Things like that. And lastly is an attendance support recommendation, which is really about early intervention. So currently, and I think this is addressed in the report, if you're absent for say 1 or 2 days, there's not a whole lot of assessment that goes on, and whether that's right or wrong, there might be an opportunity to have some earlier intervention to determine, is there other supports we could be providing that might help to limit, future issues. All right, that's it.
Thank you, Melanie. Any commissioners have any questions of clarification? Commissioner Critchley,
Thank you, Chair Kent.
this is for clarification. Or are you going to put the motion on the floor?
No, I'm going to ask some clarification
Good
questions.
enough.
That's all right. Thanks so much. I know that how much work went into the report, so I really appreciate it. Also, thanks to the chief and his whole team for providing the data, ensuring that it got done. I wanted to ask about the table on page 5. Oh, sorry, it's included on page 5 of your slides.
Mhm.
It's the one that breaks down psychological injuries and the duration.
Mhm.
And so I know that the average duration since 2019 was listed as being 53 weeks.
Mhm.
But my question was that if you look on a year-over-year basis,
Mhm.
it's actually gone down significantly.
Mhm.
Like the 53 weeks. Sorry, I'm just going to give me 1 second if that's all right. Here we go. Apologies. So for psychological injury claims in 2019, the average duration was 115 weeks. And then in 2020, it was 86 weeks. 2021, it was 27 weeks.
Mhm.
And then 2022, it was 16 weeks. So, I mean, that seems to me like a really good news story, right? That the average duration of these psychological injury claims has gone down to a tenth of what they, or like, you know, 15% of what they were previously. So I'm wondering if you could sort of maybe explain in a little more detail why that might be. And then, I mean, I note the same is also true of all claims.
Mhm.
The average duration in 2019 was 34 weeks. And now we're down in 2022 to 3.7 weeks, which is 1/10 as long as it was previously.
Yeah, so a point of clarification on that. The way that WCB presents their data and provides this data to us is the total duration of the absence. So if you take, for example, the psychological injury claims average duration in weeks 2019 being 115, that would be the total duration if somebody who went off in 2019. So that is covering perhaps 2020, 21. So even though it looks like it's going down, if we were to run this report in another year, you know, those last couple of years, the average duration will go up.
Okay, because there's going to be an overrepresentation in the 2022 sample of people
Correct.
who were on short-term leave.
Mhm.
Okay, so that's a very confusing way to provide data. So the 53 weeks though is still an average of those four numbers, I'm assuming. Is that right? Or,
Yes.
okay.
And I can confirm in speaking with the health specialists who deal with WCB on a daily basis, they did feel like the 53 weeks is roughly appropriate.
Right. But is it still fair to say that compared to the average duration in weeks in 2019, which was 115 weeks,
Mhm.
that 53 weeks is significantly less than that?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I should highlight too that we're relatively early onto our data with WCB. So
Right.
unfortunately, coming from 2019, then having a pandemic, we're going to be playing catch up for a bit with that data. And there's also some other factors too, such as WCB has a TPI program that was brought in at some point in the middle of that, which hopefully has had some impact on decreasing the length of time away. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I've got a couple more questions if that's okay. I'm going to ask, can I ask questions of maybe the chief and his team and especially Mr. Horton, because I've got a finance related question if that's okay. So I'm just wondering, we heard a lot about
Wait, was that? You should ask them.
EFAP and then various early detection programs. And I was really excited to hear about those. And so I just wondered what line item. So for instance, for the safeguarding program, I note that it said that it's contracted out to a psychologist. What's the line item that reflects that service? Would you be aware? Or I don't want to put you on the spot, obviously. Sorry.
I'm not certain if that's, if it's part of the if that would be part of, is that part of the employee assistance program?
Yeah. Oh, the chief wants to answer.
Yeah, I'll just add in very quickly through you, Chair, to the commission. So it's important to remember safeguarding is not for all employees, it's for those specific areas. And I don't know the line cost of it either, but there is a cost. So we can certainly get that for you. And it is a baseline of people going into certain units. We also have psychological testing for obviously our new hires that we're trying to, more streamline. And Ms. Gibson did mention approaching this from a strategy, a psychological strategy, a wellness strategy. And that's what we did bring forward to you at our last, session of budget and the things that would be involved in that. So we're very much interested in the long-term strategic approach to returning people to work. And I can tell you, I don't want to keep going back to the well, but this week there was a lot of talk around that. York Regional Police, the Calgary Police Service, they are having and branching out more and more into psychological services section. And the chair and I had brief discussion. It was mostly with me, with the chief psychologist for the York Regional Police. And they've been at it for 8 years. So there's lots of good examples out there where we can get to. But to your specific question around the cost, we can certainly get that for you.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get a figure on, there's various programs, there's EFAP, there's other early detection programs. I just want to know what the scale of these programs is in terms of how much money goes into them each year. And I mean, it's not fair to ask you on the spot, but I thought maybe if you had the line item, because I could pull up the budget book, that I could look at it, get a sense, has it gone up over the years? Is more money going into EFAP?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the Commissioner. It will take a bit of time to go through that. You keep in mind it would be in the same budget area as all the treatment costs go through. So to break that down and have a look to get that back to you, I think makes sense to take some time with it.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Blackburn, I think you have a question.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you so much for the presentation. I really enjoyed this report. It was quite eye-opening and provided a lot of really useful information for us going forward. But I'm just, you mentioned something in the presentation about wanting to drill down a bit more into the short-term absences. And I'm just wondering how realistic it is to go after that type of data. I'm just thinking, I'm sure there must be policies, and I'm sure there's certainly union policies as well, that, if an officer is out 2 days with food poisoning, management can't, grill them as to why were you gone. It's a very, very delicate, very delicate situation when you're trying to get information of that kind. I'm just wondering, how realistic is it going to be that we'll get more information on these short-term absences? Thank you.
I think there's two ways that we can approach it. One could be a survey, perhaps an anonymous survey. I'm not exactly sure about that, but we could get employees to generally report on why they're using days when they're using days. The second piece really comes at the supervisor level. So my sense is that when employees have a good relationship with their supervisor, that they kind of colloquially share that information. And it maybe might not be a concrete data set, but it might give us a better sense of why employees are taking that time. I realize that employees are pretty much never going to say, I'm taking a single day off because I'm tired of working or I'm burnt out or, whatever it may be. But I do think there are some creative ways that we could try and get at least a better picture of what employees are using those short-term sick leaves for. Yeah.
Thank you. Anything further? Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Chair. So related to the current efforts, and this might be for the chief, so on your presentation is 13, wondering how many of those current efforts are integrated with HRM supports for employees as well. So which ones would be just related to HRP and which ones would be ones that are access to all employees within HRMP?
I could probably answer that question. So through you, Chair, to Commissioner Smith. The safeguarding, criticism, post-critical incident check-in, peer support are all done primarily or completely through police, through HRP. Return to work is primarily done through the HR department at HRP with assistance from a couple of specialists from HRM HR. Reintegration program is done 100% through police, I guess with the occasional need for perhaps some specialist advice from HRM HR. And then, the last one on the health staff, that health specialist resides at HRP.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Any further questions? Okay, so at this time, I'm going to call on Brett Wilson. Brett, you are, I'm hearing that you are now officially the Executive Director of Human Resources, so congratulations. Before we started the meeting, I had him down as acting, so congratulations and welcome to the Board of Police Commission. Do you want to offer something? I understand.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Through you to the board, I'd like to first of all acknowledge and thank Melanie Gibson for the very outstanding work that she did in the report that you've seen today. And the second thing I would like to do is ask your indulgence to possibly amend a component of the recommendation which is coming. HR is very excited to take on this work. It's very important, and we recognize that it's important to HRP and their employees. We also recognize that in HR, the best work that we do is in partnership with our business unit partners, and that the recommendation as it stands now seems to exclude that partnership, appears to, and I'm sure that's not the intent, but I would just ask that perhaps that it reflect more clearly that Human Resources will be working on this in partnership with HRP. They have tremendous connections to other policing services. I regret to say that Human Resources departments don't have as good connections nationally as police departments. There's much more data sharing at that level. So that partnership will be very important for us to complete this work. So that's all I would ask.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Commissioner Smith has a question for you.
Just related to that, do you have a suggestion on how we could put that into the recommendation? Because are you referencing the motion that will come after the discussion?
That's correct. Yes. So there's, I think there's.
Andrea, just 1 second.
Yep.
Andrea, would you have the ability to put the motion on the screen?
Should I
That-
put the motion on the floor? No.
No,
Oh,
not just,
okay.
let's just sort through this a little bit.
Well, then you can decide. Sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's easier to put up.
Yeah, and just for clarification while that happens, so just wondering if you have suggestions on where that could fit in with the motion.
Fairly simple, simply to say that, HR Human Resources will lead, but in partnership with HRP. So I think we'll lead maybe before HR and CC, and then in partnership with HRP, and then the execution. I think that might work.
For the sake of the conversation, perhaps Commissioner Smith and other members could be looking at number 2, where it says direct human resources and corporate communications right there in, okay.
Okay, great.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. I'll put it in the other one too. Number 3.
So has it been?
Can you just highlight where the partnership is saying, we're saying a partnership? I see it's in consultation, CAO and Halifax Regional Police in consultation, but direct communications to prepare a plan. Would it not go there? Direct human
Yes.
resources and corporate communications in partnership with HRP to prepare.
Yep.
And do we have to, can I add to, do you have any further questions? Because I have a question.
No, I was just wondering in where you were suggesting that would be placed in the recommendation, so I'm okay.
Do we have to? Yeah. Okay, I think CAO had a consideration.
Yes, and my question to the Board of Police Commissioners would be whether we should also be doing this in consultation with the HRP union. As I know, we had discussed, the chief and I, sharing the report with the union and meeting with them, and that meeting is now scheduled, I think, for next week.
Well, that would be, certainly could be part of the debate, and if that was to happen, we can look at it whether or not it's a friendly amendment.
Or it may be
And once
additional.
maybe an additional motion. Oh, yep, solicitor, please.
Okay, thank you. The issue here is once the motion's on the floor, it'll be debated amongst the commissioners
Yes.
only. So
Yes.
this is really information that any commissioner could use once the motion's on the floor to make an amendment if they see to. So they've got they've got the, the input from several sources here. So after that, you can put the original motion on the floor, or you can put an amended motion on the floor, whatever, and it can be amended again, so.
I'll put the motion on the floor.
Commissioner Critchley.
Okay. I have to read the whole thing.
Yep.
You guys have a tough job. That the Board of Police Commissioners, 1, endorse the recommendations included in the human resource study received by the board, that should probably say whatever today's date is, March 9th, 2023. Number 2, request that the Chief Administrative Officer, in collaboration with the Chief Officer of the HRP, 2, in consultation with and the approval with the approval of the Board of Police Commissioners, direct human resources and corporate communications in partnership with the Halifax Regional Police to prepare a plan for the implementation of the recommendations in the human resource study, which plan shall be received for the board's review and approval at a future meeting. And number 3, request that the Chief Administrative Officer, in collaboration with the Chief Officer of the Halifax Regional Police, 2, in consultation with and with the approval of the Board of Police Commissioners, direct human resources and corporate communications in partnership with Halifax Regional Police to take immediate action with respect to recommendation E sub 2 of the human resource study by beginning to examine the total amount of time worked by HRP employees, including overtime and extra duty, to determine if there's a correlation between time worked and sick leave usages and available staffing resources.
Second by Commissioner Blackburn. And Commissioner Critchley, if you want to take your remaining 4 minutes.
Sure,
Otherwise,
I
if
gotta
you come
catch my
back,
breath first. Yeah.
if you come back, you'll only have 3. Just
Okay.
saying, you might want to take it.
Got a good thing I didn't walk up and down the stairs too many times. I don't really have many comments. I think that, this is hopefully in keeping with what we've just heard. I think it's the idea of having a mental health strategy is a lovely idea. I think this just simply endorses what we all take to be very reasonable recommendations. They're well thought out, well researched. I'm very happy to add the point about in partnership with the HRP. That's fine by me. I'm happy to make any further amendments that anyone else considers appropriate, including partnership with the union. I didn't have any specific wording suggested to me, or else I would have put it into my long sentence. The third point, is simply to say that the third recommendation just merely provides some further emphasis, in that extra duty and off duty employment is an area that the policy subcommittee is going to be looking at. It's obviously an area of highlighted in the report, of which there's recommendations about. It's an area of interest to the public. So I thought that, that would make sense to provide some emphasis in that area. But again, that could likely be received as part of an overall plan that I would hope would come back to the board in kind of some reasonable due course. I understand that there's a lot of moving pieces, there's partnerships with HRP and between HRP and human resources that need to be worked out, and, data sharing that needs to be done. But, I think the main thing is just to keep the board apprised of the developments. And that's why I've primarily asked for a plan, and that's what's reflected in recommendation 2.
Speakers? Commissioner Blackburn?
Yes, I would like to propose an amendment to include the Halifax Police Union as one of the, let's see, in collaboration with the Chief Officer of Halifax Regional Police and the Halifax Police Union, in consultation with and the approval of. I just think it is a good idea to have the union at the table for this conversation. I think they could have a lot to add. I think at this time it's just important that they are there.
So Commissioner Critchley, would you consider that a friendly amendment, or would you not?
That's a friendly amendment. Thanks.
Okay.
And you agree?
I agree. Yeah.
Any further debate? Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Chair. So
Andrew,
again,
you'll change that, yeah.
again, very, very supportive of this. And now that we're able to have the discussion. So when we were talking or when we were having discussion around budget, one of the concerns I had and I couldn't really express it because we didn't have this publicly available for discussion, was that I felt with the asks that were coming from the chief related to the mental health piece, that a strategy was needed. And with this report and with the recommendations and with this motion, I feel like that finally puts all the puzzle pieces together to not only look at the short term, long term, but really making sure that we're looking at the holistic picture. So support this. Happy that the report's done. So thank you to everyone who was included in that. And I really think this will really get down to the meat of making sure that we're supporting our members and also having a strategy for long-term as well. So again, thank you, and nothing further from me, Chair. Question?
For all those in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Before we move to the next one, agenda item 2, on behalf of the board, want to thank you, Melanie, and your supports and the team and Britt for taking this on. We look forward to working further with you and doing good things for our members and our police service. Thank you. Now we are moving on to quarterly fiscal updates, 10.2.3, Chief Kinsella.
Thank you, Chair, and I will turn the reins over to Mr. Horton and myself if there's any questions. This is an information report sent in advance, and either Craig or I will be happy to answer.
Does anyone have any questions on that? Commissioner Critchley.
Thank you. Mr. Horton, I just want to ask 2 quick questions. It's on page 1 under compensation and benefits, the last 2 line items. The first one speaks to overtime needs continue to increase. And you give, I'm not sure if that's just an illustrative list or if those are the only areas that overtime is increasing, but I wondered if you could talk about how overtime spending this quarter compared to previous quarters, if you're saying that it's increasing, sort of what the extent of the increase is. And then I wondered if you could explain in some more detail the last one there, extra duty costs from increase in officer rates and increase in private industry jobs.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through to Commissioner. Your first question regarding the overtime and the change from second quarter to third. Haven't seen any spike in the increase. We're starting to see, as we're getting into the fourth quarter, that the overtime is going down. So that's a positive thing. I indicated the sections that are predominantly seeing the biggest increases. So prisoner care, integrated emergency services, and patrolling, the patrol sections. Your second question regarding the increase in cost of extra duty. The extra duty program to pay the officers is separate from our regular salaries and benefits. So that's what you're seeing there is the increased rates for that have gone up as per the collective agreement. The rates for the extra duty officers that they're paid have gone up as well. So you're seeing an increase in the revenue side of things because we bill a lot of that back for external clients. But you're also seeing a slight increase in costs because we're paying the officers more to do those jobs.
Sorry, so just to clarify, is the extra duty cost attributable to the increase in the rates or the increase in the number of jobs or a combination of the 2?
Combination of the 2.
And to what extent has there been an increase in jobs?
I don't have that level of detail. I'm not sure, Chief, you want to comment on that a little bit? But.
Thanks, Mr. Horton, and through you, Chair, to the Commissioner. So we've just done a fairly extensive review of extra duty. We brought a recommendation through you, the board, to council to talk about a potential administrative increase. That caused us to go and reflect and prepare some information, which has been submitted to the through the CPO's office. And I don't have all the details. I do have some of them. But what we are seeing is an increase in extra duties in the private sector. So we've had a lot of that lately for a whole pile of reasons I won't get into now, but I'm happy to if you want to go down that road. The other piece is the rate was increased. It was increased in November. So that's seen an additional funding piece come in. And obviously, extra earnings for the officer. But the other thing I can tell you is a lot of the particularly private industry extra duties we are not filling. We're just not able to do it. So I think that will form some basis for our discussion when we meet with the subcommittee, because there's a lot of things I think that we can discuss as possible alternative solutions, all those kind of things. So, but any specific numbers, we're happy to get that information to you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anything more from commissioners? No, thank you. We're just going to switch now from HRP fiscal to HRP quarterly strategic plan. 10.2.4.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to the Commission. So we submitted the information report for Q3 as we regularly do. And just a couple things I'll point out before I turn it back to the Commission through you, Chair, for any kind of questions. Just the paragraph just above the graph on page 1. It's just important to remember that some of the deliverables are multi-year projects that require annual renewal due to the complexity implementation, while others are annual unto themselves or specific to the life cycle of the project. So some of them we renew after 12 months, some of them get concluded. Some of them, they're just going to go on for a while because of the amount of work that's being done. So I just wanted to add that proviso and then open it up to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Chief. Any questions? Commissioner Smith?
Thank you. So two questions. One is related to, I'm just getting my notes here. One is related to the crisis intervention and trauma-informed training in mental health mobile crisis team, because and I'm not trying to highlight it because it's one of the ones that hasn't made much progress, but I just want to highlight it, I should say much progress, considering some of the other progress that's been made on other topics, but just considering that Chief Superintendent also was interested in this topic. So just wondering if you can highlight a little bit more about what's happening with that program there. And also with the policy manual refresh, just want a little bit of understanding on where the 60% number comes from. And the only reason I ask that is because understanding that you've just with quotations, compiled all the policies, and there's still lots of work to be done to refresh them. So just getting a better understanding of where that 60% number, and that could be right. I just a better understanding of why you believe 60%, because I know there's a lot of work to be done on refreshing those policies.
So I'll take the first one, and then I'll ask Mr. Ritchie to comment on the policy piece. So in regards to crisis intervention, training, the mobile mental health, and I know as Chief Superintendent Christie mentioned, we are bringing a presentation either next month or the month after to the board, which I think will be well-timed and informative. So we do have the mobile mental health program operating within HRP, has been for many, many years. I won't go into too much detail on it, but it is occurring and has been. We also have crisis intervention training that we deliver to as many officers as we can. That allows, number one, for them to get those skills in de-escalation, communicating with those in crisis, connects them to some of the support networks better, those kind of things. And then they can use that in their regular patrol duties when they're out on the road. The other piece is they can act as backup officers to our mobile mental health officers when they're off, those kind of things. So what we are trying to do is to train as many of the officers as we can in crisis intervention training. Unfortunately, haven't been able to put on a course in the last little while because of COVID. We are actively working on that to continue that training. And then we're hoping at that point to see an increase in that percentage. So you're right, it stalled a bit, but we're working on it.
So the percentage is mostly based on members who have been trained in it, not related to other aspects of the program itself. So really just basing on how many members.
Primarily, yeah,
Okay.
it's the training piece.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
And just for example, I'm not looking for another question particularly, but under performance excellence training, it's kind of a similar thing. Although we have seen a little bit of increase there, but it's another program that we are trying to get members through, and it is up. I don't know there's a current one, but it's very similar.
Just 1 second. Nira's going to respond. Yeah.
Through the chair to the commissioner. Commissioner Smith, the 60% that you're seeing as the update is attributable to a few things. And the question that you asked is a very astute one. And that's why the chief had that proviso in the beginning around some of the deliverables are around a 1-year annual cycle and some are multi-year. And you're 100% right. We're not even close to being 60% on the strategic policy manual refresh. What we had done is we had set out as you know, we've had some initial conversations with yourselves, Commissioner Critchley and others. We had identified for year 2022 a set of policies that we had prioritized based on the various themes that you had heard of. And so this 60% is, takes us to the end of, I believe, September, or the quarter that we're reporting to at the moment. And so by the time we get to the end of this fiscal, I think we believe we'll be not quite close to 100% of what we had envisaged for this annual cycle, but there's a few reasons that, if you like, we can go into them. There's a few policies that have been, held up simply because of some, key consultation that we require internally on them. And a little bit of it has been that we have a resource in policy that also does the business unit coordination work. We are rectifying that now. I think we're going to have a bit more resourcing available to be able to do more of the policy work going forward. So we've been a little bit held up on a few of the policies that has taken us sort of down to that percentage. But it will be reset again after the end of this fiscal.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioner Critchley?
Perhaps maybe the same question then as it relates to the street check report responses. So I know the jump goes from 20% in Q1 to now 50% in Q3. And so is that 50% of the deliverables identified for the fiscal year have been completed? Or no rush, yeah. Because it's a big jump from 20 to 50, obviously. It'd be on page 1 of the information report that was provided, the second row in the table.
So this again, Commissioner, is not, I'm just going to make sure that we're not on an annual cycle on this. We have an internal KPIs document that we maintain, just so you know, for our strategic plan deliverables so that we can keep track of ourselves. So the Wortley report, as it was delivered, so we do, this one is the reporting on it is a project-based reporting. It's not annual. And we believe that given where we are now with regards to what is kind of in HRP's control, if I can put it that way, or under HRP's purview, we believe that the percentage that you're seeing is accurate. There's a few things that are ongoing, which will increase the percentage somewhat in the next little while. But some of the work that is ahead of us now, particularly in the areas of things like Know Your Rights campaign, race-based data collection, some of those things, and even some of the work around anonymizing of street checks data that we've been holding, obviously, historically, some of the work that we've been discussing with yourselves, Josh, and others, all of that work, HRP is one piece of the broader puzzle, as you know. So it is hard to, quantify that into a percentage, but we've kind of done our best to be as transparent and sort of, hold ourselves accountable on where we are. So, we can certainly discuss the nitty-gritty of that report when the tracker comes forward, which I know Josh is working on. I think it will give you a better picture of the individual details at that time. But I hope this helps for now.
The other piece, if I might, Chair, through you to the Commissioner, is there's another aspect of this, and I have mentioned it many times. I just want to mention again, we're of the opinion that some of the recommendations from Wortley will be maintenance recommendations that will continue on for a long, long time, right? So we may never, ever get to 100% on that, or we may and determine that we're going to switch to a different way of tracking and modeling. But just to Ms. Ritzy's comments, we have been in communication with Josh and trying to develop that new tracker that we're working on with past Chair Smith. And obviously also further conversation has to occur with the RCMP. And I can say that Chief Superintendent Christie and I have been having active conversations on the data. the retention of it and all of that. So those conversations are ongoing.
Thank you. Seeing no further speakers, we'll go to 10.2.5, Canadian Association of Police Governance Membership Renewal. Josh, do you have anything to offer there? Or do you want, we'll just go to someone putting a interest in putting a motion on the floor? Commissioner Smith?
I clicked it thinking I was in council, and I had a moment where I forgot the mic turns on automatically. So motion that the Board of Police Commissioners approve the annual renewal of the commission's membership in the Canadian Association of Police Governance in the amount of $5,202.
Seconded by Commissioner Blackburn. And any debate?
Nothing further from me unless Mr. Bates has anything he wants to add.
Okay. Question, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion's carried. 10.2.6, Canadian Association of Police Governance 2023 webinar series. So that would be, go ahead.
I can
Commissioner
put that on the
Blackburn?
floor, sure. I move that the Board of Police Commissioners approve the registration of the Board of Police Commissioners in the Canadian Association of Police Governance 2023 webinar series as outlined in Attachment A of the staff memorandum. I so move.
Second by Commissioner Smith. Any?
Nothing further to add. This option has been very, very valuable, not just during COVID, but since then, because recognizing that we all have day jobs outside of this and can't always sit down and attend meetings. These webinar series, you can either watch them live or you can pick them up at a later date, and found them to be extremely convenient to check in and just be a part of their lecture series. So I hope that everyone can support continuing with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Giles?
Thank you. Perhaps more concisely, we're learning just this evening that these collective bodies which provide policing information are providing information from a number of sources which are informing what we can do, what we should do, what we might do, and what we are in fact doing. For that reason alone, I think the public needs to know that there's a very valid purpose behind these attendances and these memberships.
Thank you. Seeing no further speakers, call the question. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Motion's carried. We've already dealt with 10.3.1. Moving forward to 10.3.2, Commissioner Critchley, appointment of members to Board of Police Commissioners Policy Subcommittee.
I'll put the motion on the floor that the Board of Police Commissioners appoint Commissioner Harry Critchley, Commissioner Gavin Giles, Commissioner Lyndell Smith to the Board of Police Commissioners newly created Policy Subcommittee for a term of 1 year.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Giles. Any speakers on this? No, I'd just like to add that for the public's information that we were able to put this out to all members, and they've all had equal opportunity to offer. We appreciate that Commissioner Critchley, Giles, and Linda and Smith are willing to take this on. It's a new committee for this board, and we look forward to the great work that we're going to be able to do together. Thank you, Commissioner Smith.
So just on the term, I wonder from the clerks, Andrea or Ian, the 1 year, when are our terms to come up? Does this align with when terms
Yes.
expire?
Yeah.
Okay, it does.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
It should be good.
Okay.
Because I believe, yes, I don't think it will be an issue.
Okay, good. All
But
right.
I can double check just to make sure of that.
Yeah, just because it'd be terrible for whatever reason to be in that weird, whatever administrative fumble if we get to a place where who knows what it would be. So just, yeah.
I can check that fairly quickly.
Okay. And you don't have, if you can look if you want, just wanted to make sure it wasn't a flag. Okay, we're good? All right, great, excellent, thank you. Thank you, Chair, I'm good.
Thank you. I'd just like to ask Commissioner Smith, do you have a best before date that we should be aware of or anything like that?
I think we all have a best before date, but I just wanted to make sure that because, time flies. We'll get to a point where.
I'm just being funny. I appreciate it. Thank you. Seeing no other speakers.
Did we have a seconder for that?
Yes, Commissioner Giles. Thank you. Call the question. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion carried.
And we'll now move to 10.3.3, Commissioner Smith, budget process refresh and board policy update.
Thank you, Chair. I move that the Halifax Board of Police Commissioners, BOPC, requests that the Chief Administrative Officer, CAO, provide a staff report outlining changes to BOPC's policy handbook in bylaw P100 that update and outline a budget process that aligns with BOPC legislative requirements under Nova Scotia Police Act and follows past approved council and board direction related to budget process. This report should include policy updates that include one, presentation of all capital items within HRM's budget that impact the delivery of policing services, direction approved July 2019, to incorporate public consultation into the board budget process, direction approved January 2022, and 3, incorporate the approval of staffing and budget decisions related to HRFU budget within the two-step process that was outlined in the October 18, 2022 staff report on development of budget and approval process for HRP, and 4, provide the BOPC with further detailed budget breakdowns information related to HRP budget earlier in the budget process, and 5, outlining a timeline on when the budget process engagement should begin.
Seconded by Commissioner Blackburn. Any speakers?
So really quickly, I think we had a lot of great discussion in our last budget discussion around what we want to see this budget, our process look like, and what I wanted to do here, and I'm happy to get any feedback from members, is really what I tried to encompass in this motion is what I've heard from members during the budget process of information that they were looking for. There might be something missing, so happy to add any amendments if you think there's something missing, or if something doesn't need to be in there, happy to make that change. But really, I think understanding that there seemed to be some frustration on how we were going with the budget process, and I think it only is better for us to have a very solid process, but also for the chief to be able to know that what the process, this is what we've asked for, and it's easy to just know how to go through that when it's a very highlighted and easy to follow process with that. So there might not be updates needed with our policy handbook in bylaw P100, but I think going a little deeper might allow that. I will say that our policy handbook doesn't give any direction within the budget. So I do hope that with this report, there will be some direction given there. But again, happy to answer any questions or make any changes if members have any comments.
Any further comments, or? I have a question. So perhaps CAO can speak to this. I think first of all, I'll say that I think it's a great motion. It was very clear, I think over the last couple of years, not just this year even, that we need to have a better process, and one in advance, far enough in advance that we are meeting the timelines for regional council. That is also a very tight schedule, and with pressures related to that, the rest of the business units within the municipality. So my question would be to you, Kathy, is that does this motion roughly align with what the chief would be expected to do for council, or is this a little bit more? I think I think that was one of the frustrations, that we were perhaps getting less than that was going to council. So just a comment on that.
Yes, I think it's essentially the same information that is going to council. So I don't see that there's difficulty in achieving this. One of the observations is that one of the frustrations with the Board of Police Commissioners' reception of the budget seemed to be regarding the format of the information and lack of detail. And I would suggest that in the motion where you're requesting that we outline a budget process, I would add "and format," so that when we come back with this report, we could actually show you what the tables and the information would look like and get agreement early on before we start next year's budget in terms of what the information presented is actually going to look like.
That's in the first paragraph, right almost near the end.
That is correct. So it would say that the Halifax Board of Police Commissioners requests that the Chief Administrative Officer provide a staff report outlining changes to the BOPC's policy handbook and bylaw P100 that update and outline a budget process and format. I would suggest we insert "and format."
Well, I guess, is it friendly if I make it? Can I? All right. So I asked that we insert budget outline and format on the
Budget process and format.
budget process
Yeah.
and format. And I guess that's friendly to me, and who seconded? Okay.
So there's a second piece to that within that motion that's near the very last of that same sentence, and follows past approval, council and board direction related to the budget process. Do we need format there? No, probably not, because that's about the council's process.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think that's fine.
Okay. Any comments, Commissioner Critchley?
Thanks. And I appreciate the CAO's comment there about format. I mean, I think it's fair to say, yeah, there can be formatting changes that have been made to provide perhaps more detailed information. But I think CAO, when we were speaking about it, it's not just about the way in which the information is presented, it's also the kinds of information. I'm not an accountant or budget person, but I mean, as a board, under 53.2, we have to be satisfied that in approving the budget, that the budget is in keeping with our duties under 55.3, which is include ensuring that the delivery of policing services are in keeping with community values, needs, and expectations. So if there are policy decisions being made about how much money to allot to different areas, different line items, and particularly how to make those changes on a year-over-year basis, then we need to be provided with evidence. And I think the word you might have used, CAO, was like a narrative. What was the reason that was given for, what data went into this decision? What was the evidence, right? So that's, I think, that's perhaps a more involved process and than simply a change in format. If the decision was made, for instance, that, say earlier, Chief Superintendent Christie talked about expanding the geographical scope of mobile mental health crisis team. There was going to be a change in the amount of money for that project, for that team. Then we could take a look at, well, here's why we think it will cost this much, and here's why we think this would be an effective service, and here's the metrics that show why it's effective. Then that's the sort of evidence that the board needs to have before it in its budget deliberations in order to ensure that at the end of the day, when we approve a budget, that it's in keeping with our functions under the Police Act.
Yes, and when I was speaking about format, I was viewing it to be inclusive of qualitative and quantitative information, more like for instance, the municipality has a budget book that gets tabled with a section for each department.
Yeah.
It would be like a wholesome tabling of a police budget that would have both qualitative and quantitative information, along with, the narrative to explain year-over-year changes or trends in numbers.
I appreciate that.
Thank you. Any further questions or comment? No? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Now move to the added item there are no commissioner updates, sorry, and added item, Commissioner Blackburn, Board of Police Commissioners endorsement of the public safety strategy.
Thank you very much. And this is a very simple motion. I move that the Board of Police Commissioners endorse the public safety strategy and its intended actions. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Commissioner Critchley. So no need to sort of rehash the public safety strategy. We had an amazing presentation, I think, back in January from Dr. Amy Siciliano. So just wanted to update you to let you know that that same public safety strategy was brought to council just recently and endorsed after very fulsome discussion. There's a lot of excitement around the table for this public safety strategy. A lot of recognition that much of what is in there certainly goes, it's moving us along in addressing the recommendations of the Dr. L. Jones report. So I think there's a lot of good in that public safety strategy that will help us all reimagine policing in the Halifax Regional Municipality. I ask you for your support. Thank you.
Any comments? Commissioner Critchley?
Commissioner Blackburn, I'm wondering if, very respectfully, I could add a friendly amendment, or amendment, you can determine whether it's friendly to the motion on the floor. I'm wondering if we could, and perhaps maybe we could put it up on the screen if, just for ease of access. I'm wondering if, in addition to endorsing the public safety strategy, we can put forward a recommendation as the Board of Police Commissioners, very respectfully, to Regional Council and the Budget Committee, that they fund the requested positions sought by the Public Safety Office that are currently on the budget adjustment list.
That's, I mean, it's friendly as far as I'm concerned. I'm just wondering, I'm going to lean into Marty. I don't know if we can ask of that.
I think the problem with this is it gets into another area, right? You're now into funding and particular positions that are before council, perhaps somewhat after the fact. I think, and you get the question about, we've got this motion. There has been no notice of this already, right? Of this aspect of the motion, right? And whether that's something that the CAO needs to weigh on here or consider separately. Sorry to pass the buck, but,
CEO?
I don't see the harm in having the endorsement from the Board of Police Commissioners recommending the funding. I don't think it's going to change the outcome because the debate at council, when it was approved Tuesday night, council actually had a debate on putting it in the budget right now. And we explained that, well, we don't have a budget to put it into because the 23-24 fiscal year budget has not yet been approved. Therefore, the normal process is you leave it on the budget adjustment list and it gets approved with the budget. So I would say there's very low risk of these positions in the funding for the public safety strategy not being approved. But if the Board of Police Commissioners wants to pass a motion endorsing the funding or agreeing with the funding and the approach, I don't see that it's necessary, but I don't see that it's harmful either.
Okay.
well, legally, there isn't a problem with it.
Okay.
Okay, we're
Then-
talking the practicalities here.
Yeah. So if
Maybe
you're
it should be
okay,
1 and 2.
yeah. So if you're okay and you're okay, I'm okay. So.
We'll just make sure that we captured that. Make Harry say it again. No, it was your motion, Lisa, so,
No, the part 2.
yeah.
Would it be recommend that the Budget Committee of Regional Council fund the requested positions associated with public safety?
Can they make a recommendation to Budget Committee where they report to Regional Council?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes, you can.
Thank you.
I would use the term, I think recommend or endorse is fine. It's a strongly worded.
Recommendation squared.
What was it, endorse?
Fund. It was fund, yeah.
Outline in
outlined or?
It's not just positions that are included in that funding request, so perhaps it would be fund the public safety strategy costs for,
With budget request or?
yeah, or budget requests. That would work.
Any further debate on that? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion's carried. Just making some notes here, folks. Just a second. Okay, there are any items for future consideration? Lindell? Sorry. So we have in camera next.
Move the minutes. Move the minutes.
Move the minutes. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Commissioner Critchley. All in favor, say aye. Those opposed, nay. Motion's carried. And is there any consideration of 13.2? I noticed that the Auditor General is not here. Anyone? Nothing, so we can, how do we manage that one? We don't do anything, it's information purposes only? Okay, good enough. Any notices of motion? Hearing none, next meeting is April 3rd, 2023, and call for the, before I do that though, I do want to acknowledge on behalf of the board as well to Amy, your team of people, folks that have worked so hard on that strategy. That was a lot of heavy lifting and a lot of work. Bill, you're working on something that's related. We all are intersecting in a lot of ways, and I think we're all going to get really good, it's going to get into some really good work and get to know each other quite well, because there's a lot going to be happening. So thank you all very much for that. Continue to thank the chiefs and your teams as well, the work that you're doing out in our community. So thank you. All right. Motion to adjourn. Thank you, Commissioner Giles. Have a great night, folks.